Our next keynote will also be on artificial intelligence. It will be held by Sasha MacKinnon, who's a co-founder and CEO of Mino Games, a studio that has already produced 4 top mobile games, one of them being, maybe you know it, Mino Monsters, with over 13 million downloads. My gosh. So his keynote is entitled How AI Can Change the Way We Play. And I believe there he is. Hi, Sasha. Welcome to the stage. Okay, it's all yours. Thank you.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sasha MacKinnon. I'm CEO and founder of Mino Games. So thank you for the introduction. We've made mobile games for the last 10 years. We've had a number of hit mobile games. Cat Game is our latest, biggest one. Cat Game is a game where you collect over 2,500 cats. It's one of the many character-driven games that we've done. And just like everyone else, I think, over the last 6 months, a year, we've just become infatuated by AI. And so there's a couple of other things I want to go through here, just as a little bit of background. I've been making games since I was 6 years old. I love making games. I was a Pokemon trading card game champion, which will be relevant in this talk. I am also the founder of a second company called DataGPT, which is building an AI data analyst. So basically, you can talk to something equivalent to ChatGPT, and it will analyze your big data set. And I'm a giant nerd. So let's get into this. So let's start with some of the ways that I think probably all of us are expecting AI to change gaming. First, and I'm sure many of you have already seen this, there has been a paper produced, and you can go and download this on GitHub and play around with it, where we have generative AI that is living in a simulation. So this has a bunch of characters, they're walking around, they're talking to each other, and some of the emergent properties of this is incredible. This paper was produced maybe a month ago or so, and they left it to run for, I think, maybe a couple of days. And the AI NPCs actually got so far as to start planning events with one another, attending the events, and even excluding some of the other AIs from events. So just, we really got some human properties that were kind of sassy with one another. It was pretty cool. I'm sure everyone's seen this, NVIDIA's tech demo of a hyper-realistic NPC that can speak in effectively plain English and respond to whatever it is that you're saying in real time in English. This is a pretty cool demo. I think we all sort of expected something like this to come as soon as we saw ChatGPT. And now we're seeing some really incredible videos pop up on YouTube of people coming into into some of these RPG games, talking to these AIs, telling them, hey, you're in a simulation, and the AIs are freaking out. So we've already started to see some really incredible hyper-realistic dialogue. And of course, we have seen for a while and are now starting to see a lot of generative AI creating these hyper-realistic procedural worlds. So this is a screenshot from Unreal Engine where you can just drag around in real time to shape the terrain, and the AI will make it completely realistic, generate some of these logs, generate the trees. So it's absolutely changing how we create worlds in games. So all this stuff is probably not a surprise to everyone. These are kind of obvious examples, and it's not exactly how I want to spend the rest of this talk. So this talk might be, a little bit bizarre, a little bit surprising, because I don't want to spend that much time on what we all can kind of currently see. I want to instead paint a picture of the future using AI that empowers gamers, empowers players, and will shape the course of the games industry in more ways than just optimizations of existing genres. So going back to some of these, what you'll see is that these are all just kind of optimizations on existing genres, right? Better way to generate procedural worlds. That's cool, but we're going to get more of the type of RPG games and more of these open world games that we've already seen. It'll just be faster and better. NPC dialogue, same thing. We're not inventing a genre. We're just creating a more interesting way for people to engage in existing genres. And these simulations, we've seen something like this with The Sims for a while. OK. So was that the whole talk? Chapter 2, how hit genres are spawned. So maybe just doing a bit of mental calculus, what do all of these games have in common? Right? Counter-Strike, Fortnite, League of Legends. Well, firstly, they're all hit games. And I think we can all agree these are some of the most popular games of all time. Secondly, they're all genre-defining games. You know, Fortnite being the battle royale genre was kind of the first massive installment here after PUBG. League of Legends, obviously the biggest game in MOBAs. But more importantly, all of these originated from mods. So Half-Life got modded to create Counter-Strike. Fortnite came out of DayZ, which was modded by PlayerUnknown, who created a mod called Battlegrounds, which became PUBG, blew up, and then Fortnite modded its own game, Fortnite, to create the Battle Royale Fortnite. And then League of Legends started as a Warcraft mod, which was Defense of the Ancients, and then became League of Legends as a separate entrant into the genre. So this is kind of interesting, right? Like, we have these massive titles that have generated tens of billions in revenue, and were effectively developed by one or two modders, you know, one or two kind of like indie game devs who came in and were like, hey, I think we can do something cooler than Warcraft. I think we can make Dota. So this has always stood out to me. You know, I have a background, well, since I was very young, as an independent game developer. And when I started seeing this happen repeatedly, I was like, this is fascinating, you know? We are seeing genres developed through modding, through independent game developers. So what about AI? Chapter 3, the greatest challenge on Earth. So what do all these games have in common? We've got Pokemon Emerald, we have the Soul genre, and we have Mario Odyssey. So again, maybe just take a little second, see if you can guess what I'm about to say here. All of these games have millions of hours of streaming insane UGC challenges. I don't know if you guys are as nerdy as me, but Pokemon Emerald turned into hardcore Nuzlocke. Dark Souls obviously has the most intense challenge runs you've ever seen, people playing for a year. And Mario Odyssey turned out to be one of the speed-running, these insane speed-running games. After it came out, it really, really took off as a new entrant in the speed-running genre. This is a video called How I Beat the Hardest Pokemon Game Ever Made. It's an hour-and-a-half long. If you have the time, I suggest you watch it. It's by Pokemon Challenges, Jan. And what he's done here is he's taken Pokemon Emerald. There is a modder who has come in, and he has created this version of Pokemon Emerald called Pokemon Emerald Kaizo. Pokemon Emerald Kaizo replaces all of the battles, all of the encounters, all of the moves in the game to make it the hardest it could possibly be. If you're an intense Pokemon nerd like me, this is kind of the pinnacle of where it gets. Pokemon Challenges spent over a year trying to beat this game. He streamed over 4,000 hours. This is all he did, 151 attempts. And by the end of it, he made this incredible video, which is laid with insanely deep strategy. Dark Souls. So probably you guys have seen some of this, but Dark Souls has this community of people who are just doing crazy stuff. Like, can I beat Dark Souls in one shot with Dark Souls 1 without ever getting hit? There's some guy who, it's not this video, but some guy came in, beat all 3 games back to back without getting hit. It took him a year, again, like, it's absolutely incredible what he did. I also suggest watching, maybe you can fast forward to the end. And then here we have the perfect Mario Odyssey speedrun. This is actually a reaction video to the perfect Mario Odyssey speedrun by Smollant, who's one of my favorite streamers. And it's incredible. I actually was around while since Odyssey came out, I followed the speedruns, and I saw this progression of people continually chipping away, getting it down and down and down until it was under an hour. It was incredible to watch in real time. So what this teaches us is that people love breaking games to create, play, and watch hardcore challenges. It's very interesting to think that some of these games that came out and were perennial classics have a new life breathed into them, not because of emergent gameplay, due to the mechanics, but because of how the community formed around these games to create absolutely incredible challenges. And it's really fun to watch. I actually have more fun watching this than playing the game. So, dude, this is supposed to be about AI. What am I talking about? Chapter 4, the modern evolution of the games industry. So this is maybe a bold statement, but innovation no longer starts and ends with developers. And coming from a developer who likes to try to innovate and push genres forward, I think there is a shift that has happened over the last 30, 40 years in gaming quite gradually as we start to see innovation come from other areas other than just developers' brains and code. What we're starting to see is this new innovation core loop of the games industry emerge. We have devs creating games, which inspires players to create content, like what I showed you with these challenge runs, these and mods, and then from these mods, streamers will stream they'll stream the mods more frequently in some cases than the actual core game, and maybe the challenges too. And then this will influence the developers in order to create some of these new genres. We've seen this with some of the examples I outlined. And another really interesting fact here, 30% of the next generation, Generation Alpha and a little bit of Gen Z, aspire to be content creators primarily in gaming. This is, 68% would rather have a career in gaming versus be a lawyer. This is very different to when I was growing up. 58% would rather have a career in gaming versus be a doctor. 56% would rather have a career in gaming versus be an athlete. These are very prestigious. I mean, if you're of my generation or older, these are kind of what we aspired to be. This is what we were taught to be. Go to university, become a lawyer, become a doctor, be a varsity athlete. Now everyone doesn't want that. They just want to make and play games. So what we're going to see over the course of the next 10, 20 years is the game industry start to massively accelerate as basically the mentality of this younger generation starts to shift. The aspiration becomes around gaming. It becomes, and it's not just development. There is obviously a portion of that, but development is very hard to get into. There's a very high barrier to entry. It's very technical. I mean, you guys know how long it takes to make a game. It's very hard. It's much easier to create a mod. It's much easier to create UGC. It's much easier to stream these games. And now that we have this new core loop which is emerging, we are going to start to see a huge influx of these gamers, of these aspiring creators, speeding up this core loop. All right, still haven't talked about AI. So Sash tries to mod, and spoiler here, it doesn't work that well. So I am obviously a hardcore Pokemon player, if that hadn't come through. I absolutely have loved Pokemon since I first got my hands on it when I was 8, playing Pokemon Blue. I think probably many people had a very similar experience. I was an Australian TCG champion in 2014. I love that I get to talk about how nerdy I am in this presentation. It's great. I spent over 2,000 hours in Pokemon Sapphire alone, but I've spent many hours in many of these other games. And I spent a very large part of my young adult life and my career building a company and creating a game, Mino Monsters, which generated over 20 million downloads and was, in many ways, what we thought to be the answer to Pokemon on mobile before Pokemon Go came out. This was, we got a lot of organic traffic because when you search Pokemon, you found Mino Monsters. So I was really, and am still very much into Pokemon. So I am kind of the target audience of all this stuff. So it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that I started out getting absolutely hooked by watching these Pokemon ROM hacks. I watched everything that's Smalland and Pokemon challenges, and they got very deep into these sort of niche streamers doing these Nuzlocks and ROM hacks. I've watched a lot of different mods on streaming, but Pokemon really stood out to me. And it stood out to me, well, firstly, what happened was I consumed hundreds of hours of content. And it stood out to me because this was so much more engaging in its 1-hour video format than it was to actually play Pokemon. Even as coming back to Pokemon now, I tried my own Nuzlocke, and surprisingly, I didn't have fun. The Nuzlocks, for those of you who don't know, are a set of rules that are imposed on top of the core game by players. You have to go catch the first Pokemon at this certain route. If Pokemon dies, you have to let it go. You have to name all your Pokemon, so you have this emotional attachment. It's very sad. I see you nodding, maybe you played a Nuzlocke. And these things actually have gotten hundreds of millions of YouTube views. So they're very, very popular, but they're insanely hard to play. It honestly is a challenge. It's not a challenge because it's hard. It's a challenge because it's kind of boring. We have unforgiving resets. We have rote memorization of mechanics. Single player. I'm still not talking about AI. And so I tried to make my own ROM hack because I was like, I think this could be better. I think that I could maybe change things around so that this Pokemon Nuzlocke is more engaging, more interesting than just these set of rules. ROM hacks are insanely hard to do. And I have a background in computer science. I had to get into assembly. This is like a huge pile of I basically gave up as soon as I started to get in, which really got me thinking, if I am a professional game developer, I have a career making games, I am kind of the target audience of Pokemon, I have a degree in computer science, I've been coding basically my entire life, and I still can't make one of these. Like maybe I think too highly of myself, but I actually think just basically the barrier to entry for creating this type of content is insanely high. So what we're seeing coming back to this core loop is that we have a lot of these pieces where obviously there's a lot of entrance in the dev space. We have streamers who can very easily create and promote this UGC. But although there is a lot of UGC that comes directly from titles like Roblox and Minecraft, actually coming in and modding some of this stuff and creating your own things often ends up just being adding these rules. You can't come in and create your own mod of Pokemon. It's very hard to do. All right, so coming back full circle, the AI gaming singularity. Where am I going with this? The ultimate singularity of gaming is AI NPCs have hyper-realistic dialogue. No. Where I think, OK. So let's ask a different question. How can we remove the barrier to creating mods and challenges? How can we take that one piece of the puzzle, which is currently quite difficult and blocking this innovation loop, and make it simple? And this is where I believe AI will have the most profound impact on gaming. So this is the game that we're currently working on. We have a booth. It's still, as you can see, Pokemon inspired. It's called Dimensionals. It's kind of Pokemon meets Marvel. You collect heroes from all these different dimensions. So here you have this big boss in the Rift. You have Shawk getting hit by poison, and he is from the water dimension. And we have hundreds of heroes here. But very interestingly, this is a mock-up, but actually this is how we are creating the game right now. Our development process includes AI. So what happens is if you wanted to come in and change a level, instead of having to write assembly or update something in Unity and recompile, you can literally just talk to an AI and ask it to change the game for you. In this case, I have it say doubling the boss's health. But there are a lot of different applications here. You can mod. The future, I believe, is that we will be able to, as players, not as developers, mod any game that supports something like this in real time by speaking plain English, which is really crazy to think about. Imagine how fast you could create these variations of genres, right? We saw that 3 of the top games of all time came from mods with a high barrier to entry. If we remove that completely so that anyone, an 8-year-old could come in and start to create their own gameplay, their own genres, just by talking to a chatbot, what's going to happen? We're going to start to see this exploration of genre space very, very fast. So here's some of the ways we're using it. We have the ability right now, very easily, in real time, to change the battles, to change the story and the dialogue in real time, to create new content. These things, it's just you kind of type in, hey, I want to see this equip pops up on your screen. You can use it right away just by speaking in English. And creating, this is where we're starting to actually release this to people, to have our players create these streamable challenges just by modding with AI. So the same way Dark Souls has the one-hit challenge, you can't get hit at all, we are creating these mods from players. Deal 6,000 poison to the boss. It's actually very hard to do, where they can come in, set the challenge, mod the level, share it with their friends, and start this kind of cool little game of skate with one another. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the tech here, not too much, but basically we've created a scripting language. For those of you who are really nerdy, this is a Lisp. And we've used LLMs to take English. There's a couple of different agents that talk to one another to generate this and compile it and run it in real time. And so you get this just very, very fast development cycle. It's fast if you just have a scripting language, but once you have AI and you can do it in real time as you play, like, oh, this level's not quite fun enough, I want to try this thing, boop, 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 say it in AI, and you get it. So this is actually not that complicated to do. It's not that much code, which is the crazy thing about these LLMs. So ultimately, when you put all this together, my prediction is that we will see this speed up innovation in the games industry by a factor of 100 or maybe more. All of what we saw through this presentation will happen instantly. Anyone will be able to create their own mods and content. We are going to spawn dozens of new genres. It took a decade to create these genres, and we'll start to see this come down by a factor of 10. We'll start to see new genres spawning every year. We'll start to see it come from children, right? From 8-year-olds coming and starting to make this stuff. And we know that this is not, innovation can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be game developers specifically. And finally, we can fulfill the career dreams of Gen Z. I spent a long time as a kid trying to convince my mom that me spending 10+ hours on Pokemon every day was a good idea for my career. It didn't work. Here I am. And I think that we're going to start to see something very similar, where the aspiration of being a content creator, being someone who can just play games for a living, will actually start to become real as we empower people to generate these incredible new genres, these mods, using AI. So that's it. I hope you liked the presentation. Probably wasn't exactly what you were expecting, but I think this is actually one of the most fascinating applications of AI in the gaming space. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sash. Yeah, you can read Q&A. That's what we do now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's my mic? Here's the mic. So, questions here. Yeah. Here you go.
At first, thank you very much. It was a very entertaining and interesting take, and yeah, thank you very much. My question would be, because it is so easy for even an 8-year-old to change, the whole game, if you would tell so. Age rating would be, I think, a horrible or extremely difficult task. So what would your take be to make it child safe, so that the child couldn't say, oh, add more gore, please, add more nudity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a huge question. I'm not qualified to give an answer on this. I can give predictions. I can't give solutions. But this is actually a huge problem, not just with the gaming space.
Oh my God.
But AI in general, which is that when you can have anyone create anything instantly, it just refactors how everything works. Gaming, I think, is one of the nicer examples, but we're already seeing in the last couple of months AI being used to create disinformation campaigns. We're seeing it used to create deep fakes. Like, there's a lot of very kind of nasty applications which come for free almost because of these things. So I'm not sure. And I think that gaming will be changed in terms of like the ethical considerations and regulations by AI, and more broadly, just the entire industry. We have to kind of catch up. We're already starting to see some of this stuff come ahead. So I don't know exactly. Something has to be done. It's a really important consideration. I'll still make mods.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar with what we already have with any kind of level editor. You know, there are also, like, Nintendo that has a keen eye on that, like, no nudity content, no bad jokes. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That'll be kid-friendly.
I think
so it's the same, actually, right?
Right. One interesting thing about sort of what I'm talking about is that in our game, you're just playing with the parameters that we've exposed. So whatever we have exposed as part of the list bindings is something that you can mod, as opposed to just sort of like having infinite ability to create whatever you want from the game in a flick. So it's kind of a halfway measure, but at least we as developers have some guidelines, kind of like the level editors, like you said, in order to make sure that people kind of don't go too crazy.
Any more questions? There, over there. I have seen you in the back. I'll come to you next.
So first of all, thank you for your presentation. My question is, if anyone can create with these tools, do you think that the market might become overly saturated?
This is a really good question. It's probably another presentation, but I think that we will see, and we're already seeing this, right? If you look at just the indie booth over the course of the last decade has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as the barrier to entry with some of these development tools and so on, and art tools has gone down and down and down. We're already seeing this happening. It's not specifically because of AI, but we are seeing this flood of innovation and new games and new titles. It raises an important question, which is, one, will this keep up with the pace at which people are consuming games? It seems like so far, yes, you give more games, people play more games, but also it puts us in an interesting position where distribution becomes increasingly challenging. Having built mobile games for the last decade, there's something like 10,000 games that come out on like a yearly basis. There's a huge amount of saturation in the mobile market. Just getting attention, getting featured, getting users is very, very difficult. And we're going to start to see that problem proliferate throughout the rest of the industry as the barrier to entry comes down. I think on the flip side, what we'll see is some of these seminal, like, for example, Fortnite Creator, Minecraft, there are these games which support this, which just basically get a ton of traction because that is sort of their new distribution. People are like, oh, I really want to make a mod. I really want to play this very specific mod coming from this game. So we've kind of got a tale of two cities. On the one hand, it's going to be harder to create a new game and get in front of players because there's so many. And on the other hand, we're going to start to see some of these games explode in popularity because there is so much new content being created specifically for that game, which we're already starting to see with some of the, like, for example, Minecraft and Roblox and some of these platforms.
I'm over here with the next question.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm actually one of the 32% that went on being a lawyer, but it's in the gaming space, so I guess it counts either way. Nice. You talked a lot about how players are being creative and how they're creating content, but from a legal perspective, one of the big blockers is that the publishers still maintain the IP rights. Mm-hmm. How do you see that changing? Because a lot of the IP right basis comes from games being pre-programmed. Now, if everyone can mod with AI in the game or the player is creative, it's no longer pre-programmed, at least in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So do you think we see a greater shift of IP rights towards players away from publishers?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question because we're kind of at this fork in the road where it could go either way. It could be that what happens is we kind of continue down the trodden path of people creating in some of these games and all of the IP still being owned by the game. And so far, we haven't really seen that much of a divergence from that. It could also be that modding becomes differentiable enough and the games that are being produced, for example, I mean, Roblox is a pretty good example of this, where people can actually build companies around sort of these platforms and own some of the IP around these platforms. I think we'll probably have both. I think there's probably going to be some games where the players own everything and players can build whatever they like, free from legal restrictions, part of that license. And there'll be other games where it's a little more like what we're seeing currently, where it's just the mod is it's owned still completely by the primary IP holder. And interestingly enough, I didn't put this in the presentation, but Pokemon actually started to crack down on some of these mods. It was really upsetting to see. There were a handful of Pokemon streamers who got cease and desists for doing mods. This isn't true for every IP holder, but in the case of Pokemon, it was kind of sad that that happened. I think it's actually stifling innovation. So I think we'll see both. I'm not exactly sure where it will go, but this is one of the things where it's going to be fascinating to follow along.
Anyone? No. If I don't see you, shout, okay? I do have a question. So if we talk about that AI has the potential to make game development more accessible to like anybody, you know? Like people don't have a background in, I don't know, IT, something like that, or kids, like we talked about that. Who do you think will benefit the most of that?
I think the players. I mean, it's already, right now we live in the golden age of gaming. Like my friend put it very eloquently. He said that previously we used to make these huge testaments to mankind in the form of cathedrals and these big churches and amphitheaters. And now we're doing the same thing where we're creating these digital worlds. It has never been a cooler time to be alive and just see, like you can just kind of turn on your computer and experience anything you like. And I think that we're just lucky to be alive in a time where that can happen. And we're going to start to see more of that. We're going to start to have any experience that players might like be available. So yeah, I think as a player, it's probably one of the best times. And especially if you can actually start to build a career around this, which obviously we're heading in this direction. Streaming has gone from being very niche to being a very, very lucrative career for some of the content creators and streamers. I think we'll see a lot more of that as this proliferates.
Do you think that AI may be more important in a few years when it comes to educational purposes? Like, okay, you show students with like the chat, you can make your own game like this. So it's not that easy in the end, of course, but to get like their foot into the door and get people to like raise their interest for this?
100%. I mean, my career started out with the fascination of developing games because of Flash. Flash with ActionScript was the easiest way. It was much easier than doing anything prior to that. And I think there is, obviously, we've seen this huge interest. So as we lower the barrier to entry, people will start to see, oh, you know what, I can do this stuff. It's going to be so fast. I can just chat with a bot and I can create anything. And that will be kind of like the stepping stone into a career in more into development, into creating things that can't yet be created with AI. So it depends on the time horizon that we're talking about. I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. I think over the next 2 years, we're going to see a lot more interest.
Okay, so what do you think would the first game look like that is created 100% from an AI?
Yeah, I think we kind of seen some of it. Like what I shared, it's actually a very interesting GitHub repo to check out. It's a simulation. I mean, the art is and the code is written by humans, but the actual gameplay itself comes from these little AI agents talking to one another. So I think that it's going to be hard to say exactly because there's not going to be this definitive, oh, here's the thing that was made by AI. It's going to be that AI made all the art for this, or AI helped with a lot of the programming with Copilot, or AI was used to mod it into this thing that is unrecognizable from the original game. But I think unlike a lot of different industries, gaming is designed to create an experience that is inherently human. Right? It's not functional. We're just like putting random stuff on a screen so that people have an experience which resonates with us as humans. AI will never be as good at creating those experiences as humans because it is trained on the material that we have produced.
Yeah.
So we will always have to have this human editor, this human guide that uses AI to create these things much faster.
So AI is not going to make all of us unemployed.
It's a tool. Yeah, it's not like, I don't think it's a competitor. I think it's a tool that will help empower us the same way Unity has made game development much easier.
Yeah.
And we're, at our company, we're using AI kind of across the board, obviously like Copilot for programming, Midjourney for art with references and exploration. So I think we'll just start to see things speed up. And we'll start to see AI just kind of becoming part of the development cycle along with humans.
Yeah. So, thank you, Sash.
Thank
It
you.
was cool.
I'm glad you liked it.
Sasha MacKinnon.